Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. My name is Henry Guardsman. You probably don't remember me, but you've probably seen me on TV. I'm the kind of person who gets calls on Sunday morning newscasts and on CNN when they need an analysis and opinion on the crazy leader of North Korea. I'm an expert, a talking head. For the past 20 years, I have worked in the State Department, various think tanks dealing with foreign policy, and in academia. I am currently a professor at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, located near Boston, as well as a visiting professor at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. I know it all sounds pretty prestigious, and so it is. However, outside of my clique of the smartest colleagues, I am the most ordinary person imaginable. I am 51 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 185 pounds, and there is nothing about me that could attract your attention. No woman has ever looked at me and considered me hot. No woman has ever fantasized about me in bed. No woman has ever wanted me except for my wife. That's my story. Emily and I have been married for 24 years. She works as a research librarian at the Boston Public Library. She is 46 years old, but most people say she looks 5 years younger. We met when she was a student and I was a graduate student. I was a teaching assistant in her class, and we started dating right after she graduated from the course. We got married 3 weeks after it ended. She is 180 centimeters tall and weighs about 135 pounds. When I saw her for the first time, she was a figure skater, and she still has all those curves that I love. I was attracted by her intelligence, sarcastic humor, sparkling smile, bright blue eyes, strawberry blonde hair, freckles on her nose and cheeks, as well as a beautiful feminine figure. As a child, Emily was a little chubby and very insecure about her appearance. All 3 of her sisters are tall and built like models, and by that I mean not my type at all. I was Emily's first lover, and she was mine. She grew up in a very conservative family, and she was taught to take care of herself before marriage. She almost succeeded. When Emily and I finally made love, it was the night I asked her to marry me. Unlike Emily, my virginity did not depend on desire, but on opportunity. I've never had the opportunity. Before I met her, my life was filled with falling in love with unattainable beauties, numerous first dates followed by Henry, let's stay friends, speeches, and hundreds, if not thousands of nights all alone. Girls may like athletes and musicians, and even business masters with growth prospects. But pimply nerds who are passionate about international diplomacy don't have many opportunities for love affairs. Meeting Emily meant passing the exam, which was taken by the entire O'Hare family. She is the second of 4 sisters. The eldest, Shannon, is a year older than Emily, has some of Emily's physical characteristics, hair color, freckles, pretty face, but she lacks slimness. I understand why some men find her attractive, but I've never liked her. Her character reminded me of the worst stereotype of a high school cheerleader: shallow, materialistic to the extreme, and condescending to those whom she considered inferior. At the time of my first acquaintance with the family, she had already been married for a year to Brad Smithson, a tall, handsome guy who was an athlete in high school and college, and at that time began his career at one of the most prestigious investment companies in Boston. Then there was Joni, the third of 4 children. She was pretty, but even less slender. I met her when she was a high school student, and we became friends thanks to her obvious intelligence. I helped her with her college essays. She eventually enrolled at Northwestern University and later earned a doctorate in biochemistry from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Joni later married Will, a researcher who spends most of his time at Woods Hole, the oceanographic center on Cape Cod. Of all Emily's family, I was the closest to Joni. The youngest was Denise. She was a freshman and looked more like Emily than anyone else. She was also a wild child in the family. Back at school, she had a lot of boyfriends, several arrests for smoking weed and appearing in a public place drunk, as well as a disgraceful pregnancy for the family, because of which she dropped out of school for a semester, carried the child to term, and gave him up for adoption. In her 20s and 30s, Denise married Matt, divorced, and remarried, this time to David. They currently live in Keene, New Hampshire. My first meeting with my family took place at a Thanksgiving celebration. I was raised in foster homes, so Thanksgiving was always intermittent. But for the O'Hare clan, it was a big event. Patrick O'Hara and his wife Sarah made sure that all their children were present at the family home in Tynesboro, a suburb of Boston. It was a wonderful time, and even though I got my third degree from Emily's parents and her older sister, I really enjoyed it. When Emily walked me to my car late on Thanksgiving night, she informed me that I had passed the check. I hope it wasn't too difficult. My family can be a little tense, she said. No, everything was fine. I had a really good time. I think everyone liked me, but you know how badly I read. Well, I'm not sure about your sister's husband, Brad. He seemed a bit of a jerk to me. You did a great job. Drive carefully. I love you. I love you too. 2 years after our wedding, Caitlin was born. She was an exact replica of Emily and the apple of my eye. 30 months later, Sean Patrick appeared. By the age of 12, he was taller and broader in the shoulders than me and played lacrosse in high school. Emily decided to be a stay-at-home mom from the moment Caitlin was born until Sean Patrick went to kindergarten, and she seemed to like it. This allowed her to find time to participate in the life of the church and society, and she even turned her master's thesis into a book which sold better than any of mine. I was so proud of her. She worked hard to get back in shape, and at times, body image-related self-esteem issues plagued her again. Thanks to the hours spent in the gym and self-discipline in the kitchen, she not only got back into shape before pregnancy, but also began to look even better. For many years, my career has required a lot of travel, regularly from Boston to Washington and back, so much so that we have an apartment in the suburbs of Washington, as well as to New York, Palo Alto, and from time to time to London, and several times a year to Tokyo and Seoul. Whenever possible, Emily went with me, especially on foreign trips. But because of the kids and her job, it didn't happen that often. Once a month, and sometimes more often, she would spend a few days and visit Shannon and Brad at their home in Nashua, New Hampshire. It was only a 90-minute drive from our home in Cambridge. And in the summer, she spent a couple of weeks at a house on Lake Winnipesaukee. Emily persuaded me, along with Shannon and Brad, to buy it a few years ago. I liked it there, but I rarely went there. I especially liked going there when there were only 4 of us without Emily's sister and husband. Our marriage was wonderful. We were real partners, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. If someone had asked me what the key to our happiness was, I would have replied that it was in trust and respect. I trusted Emily with my life. She was successful in her career, and we attended many social events together. At the very beginning, we promised that we would never do anything that would embarrass each other in public, and we never did. Emily couldn't stand alcohol, and therefore decided never to appear in public. I could have a beer or a glass of wine at home, but never at a social event. Henry, in 2 weeks, on Friday, we have to go to dinner at the Library Foundation. I've put it on your calendar, so hopefully you can go. I saw it. Everything will be fine. But you know you're going to have to do a dance refresher course with me if you're going to take me out on the floor. I think it's not bad. I love dancing with you. And you know, I'm not going to dance with anyone else. I hate it when someone else touches me. I also hate it when someone else touches you. And I'm not going to ask anyone else to dance because, well, you know. Yes. One day, Caroline asked me in the president's office why you never dance with anyone but me, and I had to come up with an excuse. I couldn't tell her that you strain yourself at the first demand and are embarrassed to tell anyone about it. Wait, my prim and proper wife is talking about my erection, and even in the middle of the day. What will your parents think? For most of our marriage, our bed life was normal, not great, just normal. And so we come to the present moment, well, about 6 weeks ago. It was the beginning of October. Caitlin lived in Paris, working on a diploma in French literature, and Sean Patrick studied at Cornell, being a member of the academic specialty of the Month Club. I think it's cultural anthropology now. I'd better start saving more money for retirement, because these kids will never have enough income to take care of me in my old age. In general, the children left home. It was Friday night. The crisp weather of early autumn has such an effect on me. Emily and I took a shower together, and I knew she was in the mood. It was amazing, honey. I like that we have freedom when there are no children, Emily said. We hugged for a few moments in the afternoon light, and then she surprised me with a pillow talk like we'd never had before. Baby, if it wasn't morally wrong and I gave you permission, which of my sisters would you like to make love to? Honey, I don't know if you know about this, but there is a husband's guide. And one of the chapters in this book is called Questions That Men Should Never Answer. The question you just asked is either number one or number two. No man in his right mind would answer it. I think the other main question is, honey, if I had died before you, who would you have married? Seriously, you always want to talk about fantasies, so I'm giving you permission to talk about them. Which of my sisters have you been fantasizing about? Good. I will answer, about none of them. Don't tell me that. Are you saying that if God and I had given you permission to make love to Shannon, you wouldn't have done it? No, I wouldn't. I just don't find her attractive. She's wearing too much makeup, and she doesn't have your perfect figure. The only thing she has is breasts, which miraculously appeared after her 35th birthday, which, I'm sure, cost Brad a tidy sum. Besides, Shannon can be a bitch. Okay, so there's no Shannon. What about Joni or Denise? No and no. They're just not my type. I consider Joni a friend, and she has a great brain, but she's not beautiful at all. Denise may be beautiful, but just touching her makes me want to take an hour-long shower. No thanks. I'm perfectly happy with the O'Hare sister that I have. She's all mine. If one of your sisters were Julia Roberts or Scarlett Johansson, then we could talk. You've always been partial to Julia Roberts. Why? It's because of the laughter. I love her laughter. Let's see if I can make you laugh as much as she does. Then, for the first time in a long time, we played the second round of the game. It hadn't been more than a few days when I overheard a phone conversation. I was taking the dog out for her night walk, but it started to rain heavily and we finished it early. I walked in through the back door and heard my wife talking on her cell phone in the living room. Yes, Joni, I tried. He's just not interested. No, of course not. I just asked him if he had ever fantasized about making love to any of my sisters. No, that's not exactly what I said. We're talking about St. Henry. He never does anything inappropriate. Look, I have no idea why you want this to happen. He's just not that good and certainly not that great, and he has no idea how to flirt. I don't know how he got hold of me. Yes, 4 would be better than 3, but it has worked so well for so long. What kind of nonsense is this? Think, Henry, think. What was that? I can decipher the insane rants of an evil Korean lunatic, but I have no idea what my own wife is talking about. A few days later, I was walking through Davis Square in Somerville and I heard, Henry the guardsman. I turned around and saw Matt Barnes, my sister-in-law Denise's first husband. Bad news, Barnes. How are you? Damn it, Henry. I don't need you to call me that. Do you have time for a beer? We went to the pub and talked. Matt, I'm so sorry that things didn't work out between you and Denise. It's okay. This really shouldn't have happened. The marriage had already broken up a long time ago when you found out about it. I'm sure you've only heard that I cheated on Denise, but she cheated on me from the very beginning. I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know. Anyway, how is the plumbing business going? I hear your ads on the radio all the time and see them on TV. It's okay. And I got married again. She's wonderful. A schoolteacher in Malden. 2 boys from my first marriage, and we have a girl on the way. Congratulations. We were sitting and drinking our Samuel Adams, and then Matt looked at me awkwardly. Henry, I have to ask you something. I like you, and I've always thought you were a good guy, and I've never felt like you were looking down on me like that asshole Brad. Anyway, how do you feel about what Emily does to her sisters? Well, Matt, I know they're close and all that, so they talk all the time, and I just always thought that's how families work. I've never had a family like that, so I didn't know. But, I mean, about making love, how can you think about that? I definitely couldn't. Matt, what are you talking about? Oh shit. Henry, you're serious. Don't you know? Denise told me that you knew, and you didn't mind. She just asked me not to talk to you because you were afraid I'd think you were a wimp or something. Really? You don't know? And then, over the next half hour, Matt, bad news, Barnes ruined my life. There was no doubt that my marriage was over. However, I needed more information to decide what to do. The divorce was certain, but I needed to find out if Emily loved me. One phone call to colleagues from a certain 3-letter government agency gave me the necessary information about the equipment and how to get it. I installed listening devices on Emily's cell phone, in her purse, and in her car. On Thursday night, a week before Thanksgiving, I was sitting in the family room watching an NFL game. After Emily went to bed, I went into the room, opened the app that allowed me to listen to her calls, and heard both sides of the phone conversation between Emily and her sister Shannon. So, you're coming to the lake this weekend to get everything ready, aren't you? Yes, I'll be there. My wife's voice didn't sound happy or excited, but rather resigned. Did you do everything Brad said? Yes, probably. Look, Em, this is very important. You must fulfill all his conditions. All right, dear sister. I always do whatever Brad wants. I only gave Henry love a few times a month. Because he's an asshole, that's why. And you're not as bad as I am. I stayed married to him all these years, with all his infidelities and other crazy ideas. If we don't do what Brad says, he's going to tell Henry everything. Don't forget that. I know, Shannon, I know. What a hell it is. How did we even let this get this far? Emily, you know how. So, here's the schedule. This Friday evening, Joni and Will, Denise and David, and you will come to the lake to play. On Sunday evening, everyone else will go home. You will stay and play with Brad, and when Henry, Mom, Dad, and everyone else arrive here the day before Thanksgiving, we will become a typical American family. Of course, it's good. Come on, Em, you know you like it. It hurts, but yes, I love you. When I'm there, it's really good. I love how I feel when Brad's massive meat enters me and treats me, like with your personal cheater. But then, when I get home, I realize what I've done. I'm so ashamed. You should be ashamed. Henry doesn't deserve this. But you should have thought about it years ago. Damn you, Shannon. And I'll be damned. This confirms everything that Barnes told me about the bad news. My dear wife Emily has been having an affair with Brad, her sister's husband, for many years. And her sister Shannon not only knows about it, but also condones it. Joni and her husband Will, as well as Denise and her new husband David, are also involved in this unhealthy game. At least they knew Emily was cheating on me. But I still don't understand some things. It looks like Brad is holding something over Emily. Is it just because of the affair, or is there something else? In my profession, people lie, but not many people know how to do it. I didn't think Emily could do it, but she's definitely better than I thought. She's been lying about our marriage for years. If I tell her directly what I know, I'm unlikely to get answers. Besides, I have no desire to engage in a face-to-face confrontation until I know everything. On Friday morning, a week before Thanksgiving, I woke up early and cooked breakfast for Emily and me. Hi, honey. When are you going to the lake? Today I'm going to Boston by car, not by subway, and I'll leave right afternoon to stop at Shannon's, and then we'll go to the lake together. If the traffic isn't terrible, we'll get there around 7 or so. Well, please drive carefully. I have a meeting in Washington on Monday and Tuesday, so since you won't be here, I'll fly in tomorrow morning. I booked a direct flight from Reagan to Manchester on Wednesday evening. Should I rent a car, or will you pick me up? I'll pick you up. By then, I can't wait to see you. It's really going to be sad. Patrick is staying in Ithaca for Thanksgiving, and Caitlin is in Paris. It's like it's not Thanksgiving at all. I started crying. Emily came over and put her arm around my shoulders. I know, honey. You've loved Thanksgiving ever since I first met you. Family is everything, and he will never be the same again. Emily left for work, and I started calling. First a lawyer, then a financial advisor. Then I called a friend who has a friend who knows someone. I wanted to ruin the Thanksgiving celebration at O'Hare, and would have paid a little more for it. Before noon, sophisticated video equipment was placed all over the house by the lake. The next thing was to overcome my biggest fear. Emily was very organized, so I know she kept all the family medical records. I found what I was looking for in her office next to our bedroom. Then I called my friend at Massachusetts General Hospital to make sure I understand what I'm looking at. It broke my heart, but it was just another piece of the puzzle. I didn't have meetings in Washington, but I went there in a car that contained surprisingly few things from our home and almost a quarter century of marriage. I needed a car there because I was going to fly back to Washington on Thanksgiving evening. I called a friend at Oxford and another at Stanford. I needed to make sure I had something to do after the Thanksgiving apocalypse. I thought about it, and the symbolism came up. When everything goes wrong, I'll become a zombie. While in Washington, I downloaded videos of the weekend of games at the lake house with the O'Hare sisters. I saw making love between all possible combinations of men and women, as well as between women and men and making love in threesomes. It turned out that my wife had made love to all three of my sons-in-law. Unsurprisingly, she was more adventurous with them than she was with me, including taking on an assertive role with each of them with the exception of Brad. With him, she was submissive to the point that she endured physical and verbal abuse. Brad beat her, called her a cheater, a fat cow, and a personal slave. She accepted all this without comment or even reaction. The evening before Thanksgiving, I arrived at Manchester Airport and Emily met me. She hugged me and made it clear how glad she was to see me. I only had hand luggage, so we went straight to the car. As usual, she let me drive. She took my hand and I heard her crying. "What's the matter, honey?" "I'm just sad that the children won't be here, that's all." When we arrived at the lake house, it was already late, and the only one who had not yet gone to his room for the night was Emily's father, Patrick. He was 77 years old and still physically strong. He couldn't sleep in bed, so I'm sure he spent the night in the TV room watching old movies and dozing. I greeted him, and he shook my hand firmly. Then it dawned on me that this was the last day I would be welcome in his presence, and I was going to make his life even sadder, which upset me. As we settled into our bedroom, it occurred to me that none of the escapades I had seen on the video had been filmed on this bed. I looked up and saw that the camera was on top of the bookshelf. But nothing happened here. Emily kissed me goodnight and rolled over on her back. That's what she used to do when we were around other family members. Throughout our marriage, she never allowed herself to make love when we were in the same house with her family. For the first time, I was glad of this and silently laughed at the irony. I got up early and went for a morning walk in the cold and cool of a November morning in New Hampshire. I knew this would be my last walk on the lake. Emily and I Skyped with each of our children and wished them a happy Thanksgiving. Then she went to the kitchen to help with the preparations. Although I am equally involved in cooking in our house, this time the O'Hare women, led by matriarch Sarah, were in charge of everything, and Emily, Shannon, Joni, and Denise helped them. Thanksgiving passed as usual. The meal was supposed to take place after the first football match. Patrick, Will, David, and that asshole Brad were sitting on the sofas in the family room and watching the game. I sat in the back, away from the others. Twice Patrick and David asked me why I was so far away from the TV, inviting me to join them. I just replied that I was fine. Brad breathed on me, but loud enough for everyone to hear, and said, "He's just like that." After dinner, I asked Joni's eldest daughter, Heather, to take all her cousins downstairs to the playroom. I asked her to keep them there until one of the adults told them they could go upstairs. Then I invited everyone to join me at the TV in the family room. After inviting Sarah and Patrick to take the places of honor, I began my speech. As you know, I was raised in foster homes. You're the only family I've ever had. From the very first Thanksgiving with you, I felt loved and accepted. That's why I want to share this video presentation with all of you. However, it is actually intended for our dear parents, Sarah and Patrick. The rest of you have already seen this or something similar in the past, but they didn't see it. You will notice that there are boxes of napkins on the table, as I expect there will be tears. I know I cried collecting this. With that, I pressed the button on the TV remote and took out my phone. I pressed a few buttons, and the phone took control of the TV. Then I moved to the end of the room so as not to interfere. And then everything went on the rise, with pictures and video clips of all kinds of bed activities, which involved everyone in the room, with the exception of Sarah and Patrick's parents and, of course, me. As you can imagine, the screams started almost immediately. Brad screamed, "What the hell? I'm going to kill you." At that moment, he jumped up and I calmly said, "Sit down, Brad," and shot him with a taser. Brad didn't sit down, he fell, staggering. After a few more minutes of crying and screaming, especially when Joni and Denise saw scenes of Brad hitting and shouting insults at Emily, my future ex-father-in-law looked into my eyes and humbly said, "That's enough, son." I looked at his wife, who was sobbing with her head buried in his shoulder, and, out of respect, stopped the video. Then I went back to the TV. "I want to apologize to you, Patrick and Sarah. I'm sure it was as hard for you to see this as it was for me when I first discovered this disgusting activity on the part of your children and their spouses, with the exception of me, of course. It looks like Brad and Emily have been making love at least as long as she's been married to me, and maybe longer. And this happened with the consent and even with the assistance of Shannon. I do not know when Joni, Will, Denise, and David joined this festival, but I know that this was the real reason for the end of Denise's marriage to her first husband, Matt. I continued. The worst thing is that, as if this debauchery and infidelity is not enough, I also discovered that I am not the biological father of our two children, Caitlin and Sean Patrick, which, by the way, they both now know. I told them about it by email just before we all sat down for our wonderful family holiday. At that moment, Emily went from crying to sobbing. Of course, dear wife, I do not know who their biological father really is. It could be Brad, or it could be any other man. So who is it, or don't you know? By this point, I realized that I was starting to speak louder. I didn't want to seem out of place, so I took a deep breath and waited for an answer from Emily. Shannon spoke up. Henry, I'm sorry, but Brad is the father. Oh my God. I was hoping it was Brad. This explains why Sean Patrick is much taller and prettier than me. Well, then let's get back to good old Brad, my loving brother-in-law. Shannon, ask your husband to sit down and wipe his mouth. I'm drooling with embarrassment. I want him to hear it. Brad, come on, pull yourself together. Brad, I was thinking of suing you for years of child support because I raised your children. But my lawyer didn't think it was a good idea because you're going to be in jail. What the hell? Well, Brad, as you may know, I have friends in Washington, including in a small group of nerds like me at the SEC. Brad, you know the SEC, right? I'm not talking about football, Brad. I'm talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission. It seems that the gang from the SEC recently got a little bored and decided, on a tip, to investigate Brad's work. Looks like our guy is a little sloppy. Okay, maybe even very casually. Looks like you're going to need a lawyer, old Brad. At that moment, Brad decided to jump up and follow me again. You motherfucker. At that moment, I tasered him again. He soiled his pants, falling to the floor again and shuddering. Oh, Brad. Well, since Brad's not himself, let's talk to Will and David. Guys, I thought we were friends. But friends don't use each other's wives behind their backs. So I guess we've never been friends. And, gentlemen, I will do something in the name of retribution, but I haven't decided yet. You see, I want it to be appropriate, and I haven't had time to think about what it might be yet. Unlike you and your lovely wives, this is all a bit unexpected for me. But believe me, I will definitely answer you. They both lowered their eyes. Joni, after what Emily did to me, your betrayal hurts the most. You are the closest person who has ever been my sister. I thought you really cared about me. I thought you respected and loved me. I'm going to miss you, but obviously it's over between us. And now to my loving wife. Emily, look at me. She held her face in her hands, shaking with sobs. Now she raised her head, looked into my eyes and whispered, I'm so sorry. Dear Emily, that's practically the definition of too little and too late. Isn't it? Now that our sham marriage is over, tell me, have you ever loved me? You've been giving me a minimum of bedtime for a quarter of a century, and it turns out it wasn't because you were cold or conservative or shy. It turns out that you deliberately refused me on the orders of your best lover, Brad. And I understand that. I really do. He gave you everything I couldn't give you, a tall, handsome man. I'm glad to know that you really wanted this. And isn't it great that your dear sister Shannon has agreed to share with you? Well done. I went to the TV and took out a large manila envelope that I had put there earlier. So, dear wife, here's the next chapter. The divorce papers are in this envelope. Sign them and send them to the lawyer. You see, you're filing for divorce, not me. You're filing for divorce under the article Irreconcilable Differences. You're going to tell people that you just don't love me anymore and that I can't satisfy you in bed. Yes, this is the ticket. I think the conditions will seem quite fair to you, more than suitable. You get a house in Cambridge. It's paid for, and it's worth a lot in today's market if you decide to sell it. Of course, you'll get our share of this place too. Of course, I don't want to have anything to do with this little love hut anymore. I'll take an apartment in Washington. You will also find further instructions in the envelope, for example, how to contact me if necessary. And if you argue with me about anything, the little presentation film that you saw today will be a box office hit. It will be watched by Caitlin, Sean Patrick, people from the church, the leaders of the Boston Public Library, and everyone else I can think of. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The perfect time. I'm on my way to the airport. I'm sorry I ruined your Thanksgiving. You ruined my life. And as I walked out the door, I tasered Brad again. It wasn't necessary, but it was certainly appropriate. I lied. I told Emily and the others that I had sent my children, Caitlin and Sean Patrick, a letter detailing their mother's betrayal and infidelity. Of course, I didn't do that. But I wanted Emily to think that I was crazy, that I could do something so cruel and, how should I put it? Inappropriate. I wanted her to lose the confidence that she knew me and could predict what I would do next and continue to treat me like shit. On the way from the lake house to the airport, I called the children. I needed to talk to them before Emily did. Since it was already the middle of the night in Paris, I called Caitlin first. Hi, Dad. How are you? Something happened? Yes, honey. I have to tell you something very sad. I know this is going to hurt you a lot. Dad, has someone died? No, but in a sense, yes. In the last few weeks, I found out that your mother was having an affair with your Uncle Brad. And this has been going on for several years now. Oh my God. Dad, this is terrible. Oh my God. How could she do this to us? I do not know, dear, but it's even worse. Today I found out that I'm not your biological father, but he is. Both for you and for your brother. Your mother has been lying to all of us all these years. This jerk is my father. No, Dad, I won't let that happen. He won't be my father. You are my father. Dad, this asshole is a pervert. He's bothering Mimi and the other older girls, cousins. He tries to grab our asses and says he wants to see us naked. Dad, how could she do this to us? It won't change anything in our relationship. I'm still your dad and I always will be. Yes, Dad, yes. Daddy, you're going to get a divorce, aren't you? Yes, honey. Your mom and I are done. I hate her. I know. Lake Winnipesaukee is a 90-minute drive from Manchester Airport, so I also had time to call Sean Patrick in Ithaca. The call was just as painful. My son uttered a few more expletives, but I let him talk. After we finished talking, we started making plans. Dad, I'll finish my exams on the 10th. Where should I go for Christmas? I'll be in Washington, and you can come there for the holidays or for the whole time. I know your mom will be waiting for you at home, but it's completely up to you. Dad, I'm not going home to be with her. I never want to see her again. Buddy, I understand, but I hope that this will change over time. She loves you and will still want to be your mother. Dad, I really don't care what she wants. How can I go from love to hate in one phone call? My friend, I completely understand you. After the adrenaline-fueled confrontation, I was exhausted. I fainted on the plane, but I didn't sleep during the short flight to Reagan. When I picked up the car from the long-term parking lot and got to the condominium, it was already after 11 p.m. I undressed, took a shower, had a sandwich, and lay down on the couch to watch the highlights of the football matches that I missed. I fell asleep in my chair and woke up around 5:30 a.m., my usual time. Over the next few days, I felt more or less numb. I kind of expected to go through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But it seemed that there was no rhyme or reason in my emotions. One minute I was angry, then sad, then furious, then just cold. Mostly cold, numbness. At the very beginning, after talking to my ex-brother-in-law Matt, Bad News Barnes, I decided that I would not hate myself. I would not doubt whether I was a good enough husband. I know I was. I was a great husband, just not the kind Emily wanted. She needed someone who would treat her like a cheater because she is a cheater. And I refused to have a cheating wife, so I would never treat my wife like that. I've always been guided by my brains, and my emotions have followed them. So it will be now. I wasn't going to whine and cry like a victim. It was Emily and her sisters who were sick, not me. I'll be fine. A package arrived via FedEx on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It was carefully packed with extra padding, and strange scenarios about bombs or maybe anthrax flashed through my mind. Crazy, I know. Then I checked the address and the inscription. The first thing I saw inside was a note. Henry, after you left, I realized you didn't have a pie. I always bake an extra apple pie especially for you. It always meant so much to me that you loved my pie. With love, Sarah, Mom. Starting on the Sunday after Thanksgiving and every day thereafter, Sarah called me on my cell phone. I didn't pick up the phone, but I listened to her messages. Some days they were long diatribes about how she needed to explain everything and how she loved me. On other days, a few words of supplication, "Henry, please." I never answered the phone. Caitlin and I talked on Skype every day, and we corresponded with Sean Patrick. They both told me that their mother also called them every day. They didn't answer. When they told me about it, I didn't answer. Emily will have to try to repair this relationship. The children are already adults, and they have to make a choice. On Monday, I received a message from a friend who found out about the incident from an acquaintance from the SEC. The FBI got involved and arrests were made. My asshole, Brad Smithson's future ex-son-in-law, was in big trouble. One of the advantages of working as a professor in the 21st century is that students submit their papers online. I met with my doctoral students via video conference. I had no reason to return to campus or return to Boston for any other reason until the end of January. On the first Friday in December, I was unloading groceries from the car, and my neighbor Ted Evans took a bag and entered the house. "So, Henry, what's going on? You usually don't come here for more than a few days at a time, and never on weekends. What's the matter?" Ted is a good guy, a Prince George's County detective. As long as I've known him, he's divorced, has grown-up children, and is a connoisseur of good beer. We fried steaks, yes. Real men roast steaks, even in December, and drank some of his good beer. And I told him the story. "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I know how it feels. And don't blame yourself for not noticing it. I'm a detective, and I was blinded. But how could I not notice any of the signs?" "Henry, that's because you weren't looking for them. This is called confirmation bias. You loved your wife and believed that she loved you. Therefore, everything you saw, you perceived as confirmation of your faith. Would you only see this if you were hit in the head by a 2 by 4-inch object, as in a conversation with, what was his name, Bad News Barnes? It was only after this conversation that you saw the rest of the evidence. But, Henry, I have to ask you something. If I were you, I would burn my house down with my wife. You treated her calmly, or so it seemed to me. Why? I know it is, but not everything has happened yet. But that's not all. When I first realized that she had not just cheated on me, but completely betrayed me, I immediately decided 2 things. First, I'm not going to stoop to her level. I'm a really good guy. That's right, my friend. Thanks. All right. And I refuse to stop being a good person. I refuse to let her turn me into someone I'm not. Remember, someone said, when they go down, we go up. Now I know that there are many kneeling Neanderthals who believe that the only way out is what they call it. Burn this fool. But I refuse to do it because she is the mother of my children, and I knew that one day I would have to face them face to face, and I would feel bad about how I treated their mother. Wait a minute. My knuckles are a good 6 inches off the ground, but it looks like I'm a Neanderthal. I tried to destroy my ex. The only thing that stopped me was knowing that I would lose my job if I did what I wanted to do to her and her lover. And now that you say it, I was worried that I would be perceived as a typical cop with anger management issues. I refuse to be that guy. But if you think I'm some kind of saint or something, there's something else. Ted, do you go to church? Well, I used to go when I was a kid. Not so much lately, although I'm thinking about coming back. Ted, I am a good Catholic, and I remember how in the book of Romans St. Paul says that if you treat the enemy with kindness, then burning coals will fall on his head. Henry, Paul is quoting the book of Proverbs when he talks about it. I thought you didn't go to church. But I went to the Black Baptist church when I was a kid. And in the black church, the preacher preached sermons every Sunday from the entire Bible, the Old and New Testaments. And I remembered this passage because I thought it was cool to kill your enemies with kindness. That's right. If I had attacked Emily with a scorched earth, it would have destroyed her and she would have hated me. But if the fire had come down from above, she would have faced something worse than hatred shame. She will spend the rest of her life feeling guilty and ashamed for the way she treated a good man. She will sit in our house and feel ashamed. Every time she talks to our children, it's a shame. Every photo, every memory is a shame. There will never be an excuse for what she did. You're right. This is even worse. And the best part is that your hatred of her doesn't consume you, because you can let her go. That's right. Or at least I hope so. Eventually, in the middle of January, I had to return to Boston. The new semester at Tufts and Harvard meant that I would have to be there at least 3 days a week. The lawyer had not received any documents from Emily, which meant that I would have to contact her soon, resorting to gentle persuasion. It was 11:45 a.m. on Wednesday, and I was at Harvard. I was just finishing a lecture on the role of appeasement in 20th century diplomacy when I saw two men standing at the door to the lecture hall. When I came out, I saw that it was Will and David, my two sons-in-law, who were both making love to my wife. Will spoke first. "Henry, can we talk to you? I don't think we have anything to talk about. We really want you to listen to our version of this situation." "Well, let's go to class," David said. "Could we go to your office to be alone?" "No, everything will be fine here. And it will be short, I'm sure. Let me just send this message, and then we'll talk." They sat in the front row, and I stood leaning against the music stand at the front of the hall. "Speak up, boys. You have about 3 minutes." They looked at me and at each other in disbelief, and then Will began. "Henry, I respect you very much. I've always considered us friends. I think I already mentioned at Thanksgiving that friendship is not discussed, but go ahead. Henry, we thought you knew what was going on. Our wives told us that you and Emily had an agreement, that you have an open marriage, and that you don't mind Emily making love to us." "Yes, Henry," David interjected. "Denise told me that you just weren't interested in making love anymore and couldn't meet Emily's needs, so you gave her permission to go somewhere else." And that's when I understood everything. David couldn't control himself. Smirk. "And I realized what I was going to do with these two. So why didn't you ask me about it yourself?" Will again. "I thought it would be awkward for you if I brought up this topic, that you'd think I saw less in you." Now David. "Yes, a weakling. And we couldn't do that to you. So we just didn't bring it up. So your wives told you that Emily wants to use you, and poor old Henry doesn't mind because he can't get up, and you just accepted it? Clear. So you had no problem making me a cuckold?" "Yes, that's right." No," said David. "Henry. Anyway, we've known for a long time that Emily and Brad are doing this, and Joni told me you didn't mind. So we just thought," Will said, "you just decided that you can also participate in this case." I understood. At that moment, 3 Harvard police officers burst into the room. "Dr. Guardsman, is everything okay?" "Thank you, officers. I appreciate your quick response. Please escort these 2 men off campus. They trespassed. Please find out their names, as I want to make sure that a violation case is filed against them. If you need to, I will be happy to file a formal harassment complaint. And, officers, do I understand correctly that such a complaint, if filed, will also end up in the database of both the Cambridge and Boston police departments? Is that true?" "Yes, Dr. Guardsman." "Well, then I'll come by after the next class and do the paperwork." When the officers were escorting my former sons-in-law out of the auditorium, I said, "Gentlemen, do not forget about Monty Python. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition." Over the next few months, I spent at least Tuesday through Thursday evening in Boston, teaching and advising graduate students at the Fletcher School at Tufts and the Kennedy School at Harvard. I took an early flight from Reagan to Boston's Logan Airport on Tuesday morning and returned to Washington late on Thursday evening. I will work at Oxford in the summer, and in the fall I will move full-time to Palo Alto as a professor of international diplomacy at Stanford. Emily and I talked about living in both places, and that was our dream for the future. I saw no reason not to fulfill my dream without her. The evening after Will and David's visit, I spent a few hours in my room at the Harvard Square Marriott Hotel, where I lived permanently, and did some video editing. Late that night, I sent Emily an email addressed to Emily O'Hara. One of the conditions of the divorce was that she could no longer use the name Guardsman. Emily O'Hara, the lawyer is still waiting for the documents. Sign and return them within the next 10 days. Otherwise, the attached video will be sent out to friends, colleagues, and relatives. Henry Guardman. A 10-minute video clip was attached to the letter. The video began with the voice of the announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen, you think you know Emily Guardsman, and now Emily O'Hara. But this is the real Emily. Keep in mind that the video you are about to see captures the events that happened when she was married to Henry Guardsman. None of these actions were committed with his permission or knowledge. The men in this video are the husbands of Emily's sisters. Viewers are advised to exercise caution. The next sound is Emily's scream. I'm a cheater. The following Tuesday evening, the next one appeared in the cavalcade of stars. Joni, Will's wife and my closest sister-in-law, came to my office. She had been in my office before and knew the way past the security desk. Henry, can I come in? Of course. Come and sit down. I'm just going to have tea. I have a throat raincoat, as I lose my voice due to annual winter vocal cord problems. What would you like? Green, please. Joni sat down on the sofa at the end of the room. I couldn't sit at my desk while she was sitting there, as the conversation would be too awkward due to the distance, so I sat in my chair opposite the sofa. Joni and I have found ourselves in the same positions many times. She knew it was my thinking chair. Henry, I'm so sorry. Joni, I'm sure you regret the end result, but I'm not sure you regret what happened to bring us here. But I'm sorry, I really am. I hope you'll let me tell you what I know. Joni, I really don't need to know more than what I know. Emily had been making love to Brad behind my back the entire time we were married, and everyone seemed to know about it except me. Moreover, no one thought it was a bad thing. And no one thought it was bad that Emily got pregnant twice with Brad. And all of you let me believe that the children were mine. And you made love to Brad, just like your little sister Denise, all with Shannon's permission, and Will and David made love to Emily. One big happy incestuous and filthy family. Welcome to the O'Hara clan. I think that's right, but there are a few details between them that I think you should know. But first you need to hear what happened after your Thanksgiving presentation. My father went berserk. He started yelling at all of us, saying that he was ashamed that we were his children and that you were the only decent one of us. Emily ran out of the house and was gone until the next morning. We thought she was following you, but the police found her early this morning at the end of the lake, near Alton Bay. She spent the next day in the hospital. Will and I left right after you, as did Denise and David. I don't know about them, but Will and I had a big fight. He was so embarrassed because I told him that you know that we all play together. Please don't use that word. The game sounds so innocent, but what you all did was not like that at all. I know. Anyway, I really want to tell you about what happened, something like the story of what Joni knew and when she found out. I know this won't lead you to think I'm innocent, but I need to tell you this. You are welcome. I didn't say anything, but just sipped my tea. About 5 years ago, Emily and Shannon came to Denise and me. They told us about Em and Brad. It was a strange story, but it was almost impossible to make it up. It seems Brad has been attracted to Emily ever since he and Shannon started dating. Once, when they were not married yet, but lived together, he told Shannon that he would like her to have a body more like Emily's, and Shannon was very upset. She said to Brad, "Well, if that's what you think, why don't you just go and use it?" That was before you and Emily met. Emily was going to come to Shannon's apartment for dinner that night, but when she got there, Shannon wasn't there. Brad got Emily drunk. You know how hates alcohol and seduced her. Shannon returned, and Brad dragged Emily into bed. Brad took Emily's virginity. Of course, Shannon was furious. She kicked Brad out, and Emily was ashamed. Emily left, and Shannon hadn't heard from Emily in weeks. Shannon forgave Brad, but Emily still couldn't look her in the eye. Shannon had to beg her to be at the wedding. As soon as you started dating Emily, Brad became very jealous. That first Thanksgiving, when you came to the house, Shannon and Brad had a big fight. Shannon had to go on a week-long trip to North Carolina for work, and she seriously considered leaving Brad. During that trip, it was just before you and Em got engaged. Brad contacted Emily and asked her to come over for dinner. She didn't know Shannon had left. Brad seduced her again, and I guess that's when the affair started. Emily was always jealous of the attention Shannon paid to her beauty, while Em considered herself an ugly duckling. And now there was a handsome man who wanted her. Of course, Shannon didn't know anything about it. What about me? Judging by the chronology, it was at this time that we were supposed to fall in love. Henry, I know. It doesn't make sense. It was like Emily was living two lives. She regularly made love to Brad and at the same time confessed her boundless love to you. And, to be honest, I don't think she consciously understood all this madness. There is no doubt that she loved you. But at the same time, she behaved in a way that was contrary not only to this, but also to her moral values, including the betrayal of her sister. So you two get married, and she stops seeing Brad for a few months. But then Brad begs her, and they start dating again. And he starts being very rude to her, including making her do things she didn't do to you. Brad knew that you were both trying to get pregnant and deliberately tore the condom. Emily gets pregnant and goes crazy. She is sure that you will leave her, unless she convinces you that the child is yours. And still Shannon doesn't know anything? That's right. She has no idea that her husband and sister are having an affair. But then Brad goes to a new level. He forces Emily to tell Shannon that she is pregnant, and he is her father. Shannon can't have children, and Brad wants to show her that he is a manly enough man to be a father. Brad and Emily tell Shannon, and Brad threatens to leave Shannon and tell you the whole story if Shannon doesn't let him continue dating Emily. This is crazy. I know. Emily wants to end things with Brad, but he doesn't want to do it. That's why Emily keeps seeing Brad once a month, because Brad is blackmailing her. And Shannon is letting it go on to save both her marriage and yours. Wait a minute. If Shannon knows that Brad is such an asshole and has been treating her for so long, why doesn't she just walk away from him? And if Emily betrayed her, why should she care about Emily marrying me? Because Brad has something on Shannon that she doesn't want our mom and dad to find out about. The reason Shannon can't have children is because she got pregnant in her freshman year of college and had an abortion, and with complications. You saw how my parents reacted many years ago when Denise got pregnant, delivered the baby to term, and gave it up for adoption. Shannon was sure that if they found out that she had an abortion, they would disown her. And she told Brad about all this, and he used it against her. There's no bigger asshole than Brad Smithson. Exactly. And so Emily and Brad continue to make love behind your back, and Brad becomes more and more violent. Emily wants to leave, but she can't take the risk, and Shannon can't push her. And then Emily gets pregnant again, and the blows continue. This brings us back to about 5 years ago. Brad decides he wants to increase the party and tells Shannon and Emily to do whatever they need, but let Denise and me play too. At first, they try to tell us how big and good Brad is, but we both refuse. Then they tell us about the blackmail Brad is using on Emily, and Denise agrees. I'm still refusing, and at this point I'm seriously considering telling you. But Emily came to me with a plea, and I said that I would only do it if we could convince our husbands to open our marriages, and they would participate too. In other words, I will only cheat on Will if it's not cheating, and he will play with my sisters. That's the only way I'd do it, because I couldn't handle the guilt. So we've started. We got together twice a year. What you saw was the 9th time. I once overheard Emily talking on the phone about trying to get me into this. What was that? A few months ago, I told them that Will and I were no longer going to participate and that I would not be able to cope with the guilt that you did not know. If not about the past, then at least about what we are doing now. That's why Denise and I came up with the idea of inviting you, and we'll all act like we're just getting started. Joni is a very interesting story. It's unbelievable. And I'm saying it literally. I don't believe it. However, even in the best-case scenario, the only possible motivation for Emily's action is love for Brad and blatant disrespect for me. Henry, I understand why you doubt that. It just sounds perverse. And I can't explain Emily's behavior. To be honest, I have no idea what your bed life was like with Emily, but I have to say that Brad was much better than Will. I love Will more than my life, but he's just not very good in bed. I wouldn't sacrifice my marriage for a better love affair, but I can understand the attraction to Brad. However, from what I saw on the Thanksgiving video, Brad has never been as cruel to me as he was to Emily. Joni, I don't think your story about debauchery has changed anything, but I hope it helped you to tell it, because it certainly didn't help me. I think I need to go to sleep. Henry, I know we're probably not going to be friends anymore, but please know how sorry I am. For everything. And one more thing. After everything went down the drain on Thanksgiving, Brad told my parents about Shannon's abortion. I don't see them staying together. I must admit, when Joni left my office, I was surprised and amazed that she did not ask me if I had done anything to harm her husband. Maybe it was because she didn't think I was capable of such a thing. The daily calls from Emily continued. Henry, I know you've been talking to Joni. Please talk to me. There are other things you need to know. Please, I love you. I'm so sorry. 2 days later, my lawyer called me. Emily signed the papers. Brad Smithson got his 15 minutes of fame, as I saw in the Boston Globe and on News Center Channel 5. He was not sent to prison, but he will no longer work in the financial sector, and the fine he paid has dramatically changed his lifestyle. It's a pity for Shannon, because when she filed for divorce, there wasn't much left of him. I waited a few months before letting the other shoe fall off. I already knew a lot about video editing. I sent Will and David an edited video of their wives making love to Brad. But it wasn't about the photos. They were audio recordings. In them, you hear how Joni and Denise not only agree to Brad's words that he is much better than their husbands, but both ladies go much further. They call their husbands weaklings, tiny assholes, selfish in bed, not real men, and, what I like most, pathetic. So much for David's grin. I didn't send the video to anyone else, but the audio recording got to their work colleagues and friends. It was July. The divorce had been finalized several months ago, and I had settled in Oxford. I still haven't seen Emily or spoken to her. The calls stopped a few days after the divorce became official. Caitlin called from Boston. Her grandfather Patrick died. She will attend the funeral, as will Sean Patrick. I stayed in England. I sent flowers. He was a good and noble man, and I thought it was appropriate. All this happened 4 years ago. Today is the funeral of Sarah, Emily's mother. Caitlin and Sean Patrick were there. I live in Palo Alto and was not present. No, I haven't remarried and I don't date anyone regularly. I don't have the energy for this. No, Mom, Dad's not coming, Sean Patrick replied to his mother's question. Why can't he just move on and forget about it? Why can't he just forgive me? Why should he keep all his pain? Caitlin replied, Mom, that's right. Dad has completely and definitively come to terms with this. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't feel anything for you. Then why isn't he here? He probably can't bear to see me. I got married again, and he probably can't stand it. Trust us, Mom. He's not here because he just doesn't care. He doesn't even know you're married. What do you mean? Didn't you tell him? No, Mom. We didn't tell him because he doesn't ask about you. Never. He just doesn't care. And when are you two going to find someone, get married, and give me grandchildren? Well, dear mother, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It seems like we've never seen a pattern of a good marriage. Yes, Mom. I wouldn't come close to marriage. Never. Not after what you've shown us. The children told me about this conversation, and that's how I found out that Emily had remarried. I do not know any details, and I don't need to. I don't care. Except it looks like the burning embers are still falling down. All of this seems appropriate.